Hello and welcome to this video that is going to be about late game Clanfolk. Clanfolk is a lovely early access management game where you manage a little family of Scottish people in the 1300s. It's a really lovely game and I think it'll be interesting to make this video about how organising everything in the late game is different from organising things in the early game. This is my clan, Pringle, so altogether we have 5 couples and 2 juveniles and 2 babies, but more babies on the way. This is where they live. This is the kitchen. This is my favourite room. I don't know why, I like how it turned out. Above that is going to be the gathering area. So they've got a little gathering area with the musical instruments. And then, I forgot to say why the kitchen is set out this way. I wanted to separate it into different things. So you have the 2 kitchens here, where you do the actual cooking. And little space here for dirty dishes. Then we have the bread making over here on the top left. Bottom left we have cheese and butter making. Bottom right is smoking and drying. And then over here we have the freezer, which is set to -6 because it's got 1 pallet of ice jugs per 9 tiles of floor. We've got a lot of food there and I'm going to go more into the food later. On the right over here we have the barn. And we'll quickly switch down the bottom here. We have quite a few sheep and pigs. Too many pigs, honestly. I need to slaughter some of them, but I'm holding off on that for now because I don't actually have room to store all the meat that I'd get from that. Hopefully I can sell some of them eventually. They've got a big field here which I just used all my fertilizer on at the end of winter to get the grass growing quickly. Because we're running out of hay up the top, so I'm going to have to cut off the hay in the troughs in a little while and let them just eat grass. On the top here we have the barracks on the left with the tartan bed covers, which is where the juveniles live and the workers. And then on the right I call this the inn, where all the guests stay overnight. So they have toilets, they have bath and water dipper and peat stoves. I prefer peat stoves over fireplaces usually because I find it easier to stock up on peat brick than on branches, and peat stoves do a bigger area. Then here we have the couple's bedrooms. I really like how these are going to turn out. This is probably the final design for them, so they have their own toilet, bathtub, and I have linked them to the couple. Water dipper gets linked, toilet gets linked, bed gets linked, and the baby basket gets linked. But I'll have to remove Grebe there because he's not a baby anymore. So we have 5 couple bedrooms at the moment. I'm waiting to get more tartan cloth for the rest of the rugs. Even with that many sheep, it still takes a while to get all the wool. And I'm making a 6 bedroom down the bottom. On the left here is the workshops. They're not completely sorted out yet. I mean, this top one is the tailor and the tannery. And the top left here is the blacksmith. And I guess you could say the middle one is the carpenter. And the bottom one is the mason. But I'm going to make some more rooms on the left here and spread it all out a bit more so I have room for more storage because I want to put some of this outside storage inside. And then we have the crops. I have lots of crops and it takes a lot of my clan folk to look after them. This is the little crop room next to it where I keep all my fertilizer. I did have like 2,000 fertilizer before I fertilized everything in the prep for this coming spring. And then I have the seeds and the grain there as well. And I'll go more into the farming in a sec, but the last building to look at is the new mechanics with the latest update, which is the tomb and the wake beds. When a clan folk die, they go on this wake bed so that other clan folk can say goodbye. And then they get put into a tomb. You can still bury them outside, but it looks much nicer in the tomb. You can customise what glyphs you want on their tombstone. Let me go over how I manage some things in the late game. First of all, this bar up the top with all the different resources. I customise this myself. If you right click on a resource, that will remove it from the bar. And if you go into inventory and you click on a resource, you can bookmark it or not bookmark it. And then you can left click to move the resources around too. I don't have all the resources up there. I get rid of a fair few of them and I add a fair few of them. And I arrange them as I like. For example, I have the oats sheaf right next to the oat grain. I have the wool in line with the hank and the cloth. I have a lot of the raw food up here as well, and I'll go into why about that a little bit later. The first thing I manage a lot is farming. If you see on the bottom right here, there's the priorities for the auto fertilizing and such. So I did edit these to make watering the top priority, then harvesting, replanting and fertilizing, just to help them out a bit so it's not so much of a mess what they do first. On the top left here, I'm growing oats. Now, I had to do a bit of maths for this because the thing to realise about oats is that you turn the oats sheaf that you harvest into oats grain. And then you actually have a few different uses for oats grain. You can use that to replant and get more oats sheaf, or you can use it to make brose on the peat stove, which I don't usually bother with, or you can use it to make bread. And you've got to be careful not to use up all your oat grain to make bread, because then next year you won't have anything to plant to get more oats sheaf and therefore more oats grain. Both these columns here on the left are 16 tiles each, and you get about 3 times the oat grain out of it that you put into it. So I just had to do some maths and work out that I can make bread with oat grain over 800 oat grains. If I had 1200 oat grain, I could make 400 oat flour and be okay for the next year. So I've just got to remember that for oats in particular, because it can be a bit tricky. On the top right here we have flax. I make a lot of flax. I tend to have a lot of it, or at least I did have a lot of it. I've sold a bit of linen cloth. I guess I used up a lot over winter, but we'll make a lot more now. But I don't consider the flax a high priority. I kind of wish you could make some of these crops higher priority than others. And then we have the trees. Now the trees are important because, I mean, yes, there are still trees I could clear on the map, but that makes my people have to travel a fair way. So growing trees is good because they grow faster when you have them on tilled, fertilised soil. So I have trees there, and then I have a new crop of trees down here because I realised the top trees weren't quite enough to get me through the year. Then I have my vegetables on the bottom here. Onion, kale, neeps, and bean. And I do save all of those, and I'll tell you why later. Then on the right here we have some berry bushes that are not flowering yet. That will wait for a bit. I don't know exactly why I have berry bushes. They're not essential, but I just find them a bit of fun. It adds a bit of flavour. And then this row is all hay, because hay grown on tilled fertilised soil will grow faster and give you more hay out of it when you harvest it. And that will help me build up my hay stores for winter. And I think I'm going to add a little patch for heather and bluebell. That's the farming, and they spend a lot of time watering and fertilising all of this. And then, then harvesting and having to get rid of the sheath and replanting. So spring, summer and a bit of autumn, that is probably the biggest task that my clanfolk are embarking on. The next thing I want to talk about is food. Now, in the early game, you might be used to putting a lot of your food on auto supply. So in early game, you might have cooking your fish and your eel and your meat and your pluck on auto supply. And then you might move on to having them on the smoker, smoked meat and smoked fish on auto supply. The only thing I still have on auto supply is cooked eel, because you can't do anything with eel except cook them. But all my raw meat, all my vegetables, my bread, my raw fish, oh, that's right, I do also cook the eggs automatically when I have chickens. And I save the pluck as well, and I save all of that because I want to make more rich meals for my clanfolk. The more rich meals include haggis, for which you need pluck, oat grain and onions. And as you can see, that gives you a 5,000 to your food, plus 1,500 plus to your mood, 1,000 plus to work, and then if you go down here, vegetable soup is another one I like to save up for, plus 30% movement speed, food 5,000, a buff because it ate vegetable soup. Hearty stew gives plus 1,000 warmth, plus 2,000 work, and a buff because you ate stew. For that you need raw meat, broad beans and bread. And then there's fish stew, which gives you a bunch of buffs to all kinds of experience, which is just fantastic. So I save up for those 4 meals a lot. I still do have a lot of dried mushrooms and some smoked meat, but I do save it up and I don't put those meals on auto supply because then I'll run out usually of one or the other. I don't really want to do that. I manually go in and tell the clanfolk when I want them to make some of that. So usually if I get down to 5 days of food, I'll start making some more of those. This really only works in late game, I find, because you have to have a stock of food, you have to have a lot of it set up properly so you're not constantly running out of food. You need to be able to afford to save all that raw food. Usually in the early game, you really have to cook and eat that as quickly as you can. And as you can see, my freezer here is chock-a-block, and I've got a lot of raw meat, which is, I have more raw meat than I have all my other ingredients. Probably because I slaughter a lot of my pigs. I actually run out of space for my raw meat, which is kind of annoying. And the other thing to think about with food is you go into inventory and into food, you can actually change the desirability of different foods. So I have dried mushrooms set at 25%, which I think is the default, but if you go into hearty stew, for example, it's 100%. So they will eat their stews, their soup, and their haggis before they eat the dried mushrooms, which is great because the mushrooms are a backup. What I really want them eating is the good food, the stews, the soup, and the haggis. And a bit of the eel, so the eel is also set at 100. I might actually move that down to 80 so that they eat the stews and haggis first. There is also the meal, I think it's called haggis and neeps, but I haven't unlocked that yet because I have yet to make butter. Remember to go in and change the food desirability. I went into berries. Berries is actually the highest because they spoil the earliest, though not that it really matters when you have a freezer to keep them in. Let's see, what did I put for cook egg? 100%. I'll put that down to 80. That's how I organise the food in a late game Clanfolk, and I just wanted to share that because it's a little different than early game. Another thing that I do organise a little bit differently in late game is clothing. In early game, I mainly just concentrated on getting all my clanfolk to have a fur cloak, a fur hat, and a fur tunic for winter. But as the time went on, and I came into more winters than that, we've had 3 more winters since then, I have transferred them to leather, so leather bottoms, leather tunics, and wool cloaks and wool hats. It took me a while to work up the wool, because even with this many sheep, it takes a while to get all that wool. That's what I do, and I have it all set up here so I know how much I can make. So 10 wool hank equals 1 wool cloth. So if I look at the wool hank up the top here, I could make 19 more pieces of wool cloth, or 19 more pieces of tartan cloth. And I do like my people to also have plaid to wear, because, you know, they look nice wearing the clan colours. And then we have the linen hank, which works the same with the linen cloth. I do tend to have more linen than that, but probably have more when I grow some more flax, because we're just coming out of winter. And then the leather. I have to have dry hides for that, which I think I'm going to move those over here so I can see. And I might go into inventory and get ashed hide and bookmark that, and clean hide and bookmark that, because I just like to be able to see the process like that, so I see what I have and where, and so I know exactly how much I can make. And I go into the tailor bench and I specifically ask for certain amounts of things. And then of course you can also make the decorative hides and decorative tartans, which you can use for bed covers and for rugs and wall hangings. I am trying to decorate slowly as we go through. That was something I wanted to mention at the end, but I'll mention it now. I am trying to save up tartan cloth and hide sometimes, and I will try and save some heather to make heather wreaths. I do have some here. They're the ones hanging above the baby baskets, because I do want my clan looking nice eventually. I want tartan everywhere. This is what I would consider, for myself at least, a very late game clan. But I know some people end up with hundreds of clanfolk. I don't think I would have the patience to deal with that many. I don't know how I have the patience to deal with this many animals. Anyway, I hope you learned something from that, and I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please consider liking and subscribing. It really helps me out, makes me feel good. Thank you, bye.